Bobby Mackey's Music World was the most haunted nightclub in America. Or was it? Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures sure thought so.
Did someone just scratch me?
After filming a few episodes at Bobby Mackey's, Zach maintains that the building is so haunted, you just can't help but capture paranormal activity there.
When you have an aggressive force, that means it's more loud, it's more active. And you can capture that. We can capture that activity.
So in this video, we'll be putting that claim to the test by looking at what other investigators have found when they've visited Bobby Mackey's. Raw.
Is there someone in here who doesn't like women?
Extreme.
I'm gonna use the God helmet.
These are the other Ghost Adventures.
That is the most scariest thing I've ever seen.
Before we get started, it's probably important to make sure you're aware that you're watching part 2 right now. Here's what the first part looks like. Make sure you watch that first if you haven't. Or don't, you know, if you just want to be chaotic. In the first video, we looked at all the historical discrepancies behind the story of Bobby Mackey's Music World. And we found that there's very little cold hard fact and an awful lot of urban legend. We'll be digging into the origins of all those urban legends later in the video. We also broke down the Ghost Adventures episodes at Bobby Mackey's in part 1, but now we'll be doing some comparing and contrasting to other investigations. After all, if this place is as haunted as Zach says it is, other investigators should have had very similar experiences, right?
Hey there, demons. It's me, your boy.
Uh-oh. That looks like a guy who's about to get the Trinity mocked on his back. He does get the Trinity mocked on his back, doesn't he? Doesn't he? The first alternate investigation at Bobby Mackey's we should talk about is the one that ghost hunters did. Jason Hawes and his crew at the Atlantic Paranormal Society, or TAPS. If you're unfamiliar with ghost hunters, it's considerably less sensational than Ghost Adventures. There's a lot less chest puffing and a lot more chin rubbing. Their investigation of Bobby Mackey's is about as polar opposite as you can get from Ghost Adventures, and right from the beginning, it seems like Jason has a chip on his shoulder about it.
You know, it's been investigated by other people, and they didn't necessarily get the facts right as far as we know.
No, they haven't. It's been blown way out of proportion.
This line caught my interest right away. I mean, Jason's gonna go in there and set the record straight about Pearl Bryan having nothing to do with the place, and Johanna not being a real person, and correct all the misinformation, right? Well, not exactly. They mostly end up repeating the same misinformation.
And they ended up decapitating her and throwing her head down the well in this basement.
What happened to Johanna? I mean, what?
Well, she found her lover murdered downstairs in the basement.
I'm just gonna go ahead and ignore all the Pearl Bryan and Johanna stuff in these other investigations, because not only did we already debunk the history of those two people in part 1, but we'll be talking about them a lot later in the video. However, the Ghost Adventures episode emphasizes something about Pearl and Johanna that I've neglected to talk about so far, and that's that they were both allegedly pregnant when they died.
There was a young woman named Pearl Bryan. She was 5 months pregnant at the time. And there was a young singer there named Johanna. She also was 5 months pregnant.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable, isn't it, Grant Wilson? Well, that's because it's made up. According to the autopsy report, Pearl Bryan was about 5 months pregnant when she was murdered, so that part's right. However, this detail about Johanna also being 5 months pregnant, well, I have no idea where they got that. Now, to my knowledge, I've read everything that there is to read about this so-called Johanna person, and nothing I've read has specified how many months pregnant she was when she died. So, I genuinely have no idea where ghost hunters got this information. And this isn't the only bit they got wrong. They decided to link in a third example of a tragedy affecting a pregnant woman at the location.
Bobby Mackey, his wife Janet, she felt as though she was thrown down a flight of stairs by some unseen force. And when this happened, she was 5 months pregnant.
No, that's actually not true either. Bobby Mackey and his late wife Janet did unfortunately miscarry after she fell down a flight of stairs. But she was not 5 months pregnant.
All right, hey guys, just wanted to issue a quick correction. Not a miscarriage, actually a premature birth. So I got that one wrong. But when I get something wrong, I try to jump on it immediately and correct it as soon as possible. So this is kind of the 11th hour before the video is coming out. When I caught this mistake, I was reviewing my notes and I was like, why did I say that? So just wanted to issue that correction. I wish I had a more fun update to share. Maybe later.
If you can believe it, Bobby and Janet actually went on Jerry Springer back in 1991 to publicly discuss what happened.
You were literally picked up off the ground, thrown down the steps.
Right, pushed by something down the steps. And there was a voice saying, get out, get out.
It was a premature birth.
Yes. Premature, she was 3 months early.
Now, last I checked, 9 minus 3 equals 6, not 5. They even specify how much the baby weighed at the time.
She weighed a pound and 15 ounces.
And she weighed a pound 15
It was
ounces.
a premature birth.
Now, obviously, there's some variation with this, but this weight tends to correlate with the range in weeks 26 through 28, which is between 6 and 7 months pregnant. Now, you might say, oh, who cares? Why are these details important? What does this have to do with the hauntings at Bobby Mackey's Music World? Well, when you start off the investigation saying something like this...
You know, it's been investigated by other people, and it didn't necessarily get the facts right as far as we know.
No, they haven't. It's been blown way out of proportion.
But then you immediately proceed to not get the facts right yourself. Well, it kind of puts a damper on the whole investigation, now doesn't it? Pearl was 5 months pregnant, so then they just decided that Johanna and Janet were also 5 months pregnant. Johanna we can't possibly confirm because by all accounts, she doesn't seem to have even existed. And Janet confirms herself that she was way beyond 5 months.
Yes.
Premature, she was 3 months early.
So why did ghost hunters erroneously say all 3 women were 5 months pregnant? The only reason I can think of is that the facts were embellished in order to build a narrative for the episode.
And she was 5 months pregnant.
Another one 5 months.
Yep, another one 5 months.
Really targeting pregnant people, that seems to tie in with the history.
And our client wants to know why pregnant women are being targeted and who could be behind it.
So yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the Ghost Hunters episode is focused on this pregnancy angle, and frankly, nothing interesting comes out of it, despite their best efforts.
Is there someone in here who doesn't like women? I'm with child and they told me I shouldn't come down here.
Jason and his Ghost Hunters crew actually end up emphasizing something interesting about Bobby Mackey's building that I had questions about myself though. Tour guide Wanda Kay mentions that people experience waves of nausea inside the building, especially in the basement.
I get a lot of people that are getting scratched, they're getting sick, they're getting nauseous.
And this is a phenomena that Zach Bagans experienced too.
I just feel really, really lightheaded right now.
Not that Zach is the most reliable narrator in the world, but this seems to be a common feeling that people have here. Here's Nick Groff experiencing something similar.
Right when I walked in, I felt that just overwhelming feeling of sickness.
And his Paranormal Lockdown co-host, Katrina.
It's the heaviness on my chest again.
Yeah. I noticed multiple investigators saying this before they brought this up in the Ghost Hunters episode, and I found the pattern interesting. Why do people feel nauseous or uncomfortable in this building? Is there a scientific reason for it? Well, Jason and his team have an explanation.
We did notice while we were walking around there that the whole area has a high K2 reading.
Some of the theories out there are that paranormal activity is fueled by magnetic fields.
Britt did do an EMF sweep right when that happened, and we discovered that, the EMF level in that room is pretty high.
The TAPS team detects a strong electromagnetic field, or EMF, at the location, and they think that these high levels could explain why both investigators and visitors experience these uncomfortable feelings.
There's people who have sensitivity issues to high magnetic fields that can lead to everything from nausea, fatigue, hallucinations.
Interestingly, it's an explanation that tour guide Wanda Kay readily accepts.
When you come into the club, you do have to keep in mind if you get to feeling a little disorientated or something, it could be to the electric field that we have going on here now.
Now, this piqued my interest. The TAPS crew present themselves as science-based investigators, and they claim to have found a possible scientific explanation for why people feel weird at Bobby Mackey's. They say high levels of EMF could affect people like this. But is it true? From everything I could find, which I'll sum up with this screenshot just for brevity's sake, there's no consistent evidence that low-frequency EMF, which is a non-ionizing type of radiation, has any effect like this on people. The investigation into Bobby Mackey's, conducted by Military Veterans Paranormal, which I referenced several times in the previous video, sent EMF readings from the location to two scientists named Michael Baker and Mitch Silverstein. And the two of them essentially ended up disagreeing on the effects of EMF. Since there's reasonable debate on the subject, I'm not sure I can get on board with EMF being the explanation behind these paranormal experiences people have at this location. Still, if it's not EMF or spirits, is there anything else that could cause someone to feel at least nauseous or uncomfortable in an environment like this? Well, it could be a lot of things. There's something called sick building syndrome that people can experience, where poorly ventilated buildings can have bad indoor air quality that makes people feel sick. Just look around this place. Does it look well ventilated to you? Actually, Amy from Taps even tells us there's no ventilation at all in the basement.
And there's no air conditioning down there. There's no ventilation.
Related to this, it could be CO2 buildup. It could be exposure to mold. It could be a lot of things causing this general feeling of unease with visitors. Michael Baker, the scientist I talked about just now, who's of the opinion EMF could be to blame, brought up another interesting possibility though. The possibility of infrasound, or sound below the threshold of human hearing, which he says can cause people to see things that aren't there in their peripheral vision. I'm glad Mr. Baker brought this up because infrasound is a subject I had a lot of interest in already. If you're wondering what he means by seeing something in your peripheral vision, this is probably based on the findings of Dr. Tony Lawrence and Vic Tandy, who were working in an allegedly haunted laboratory when they started noticing strange hallucinations in the corner of their eye. They soon discovered that a nearby extractor fan was creating infrasound at 18 hertz, which is the same as the resonant frequency of the human eye. They turned this fan off and stopped having the hallucinations. Turns out the paranormal experiences they were having were due to infrasound. If you want to dive into the details, you can read more in their 1998 paper, Ghost in the Machine. It's available for free online. YouTuber Adam Neely conducted an experiment where he amplified 18 hertz infrasound in an empty room for 10 minutes and reported afterwards that he felt a sense of unease.
You can't hear it, but there's definitely a sense that like something is wrong. Something's terribly, terribly wrong.
Why does infrasound allegedly create these feelings of unease in people? Well, I have my own theories. Disclaimer, pseudo-scientific ramblings incoming. So, remember how in ancient times some humans lived in caves? You know, cavemen. Well, probably the main risk of living in a cave is that the cave could collapse. Kind of a big deal if that happens, right? You would die if a cave collapsed on top of you. So, could humans have evolved to detect micro vibrations or infrasound as an early sign that they're in an unsafe environment, such as a cave about to collapse, and that they need to get out? Because when you think about it, a lot of these haunted locations are in older, unmaintained buildings that are clearly structurally unsound. I mean, there's a reason that this haunted Bobby Mackey's building is being demolished instead of renovated. It's because the building is in a state of disrepair. It's an unsteady, unsafe structure, much like those caves. In the case of Bobby Mackey's, I also have a pretty good idea about where some of that infrasound could be coming from, too. Do you remember what's behind it?
This railroad track that runs behind the building.
Yeah, there are trains that run directly next to Bobby Mackey's, 16 feet away, in fact. And they're actively running every day. I'd like to leave you at the end of this little rabbit trail section with the famous Nikola Tesla quote. If you wish to understand the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. Structurally unsound building, active train tracks nearby, poor electrical shielding in the walls. I'm not saying these explain everything, but it's a compelling possibility to at least explain the general bad feelings that some people get when they visit Bobby Mackey's. Anyway, thanks for that lead, Ghost Hunters, but unfortunately, there wasn't much else of note in this investigation. The rest of it is mostly nothing burger audio clips like this one.
They acknowledged you.
They play 3 or 4 ones like this before triumphantly calling it a day.
We're just happy to have come here and to help set some facts straight.
We're very glad that you did.
You know, I gotta say, I don't understand what facts they set straight. They glossed over all the Pearl and Johanna stuff. They were like, yeah, they tossed her head down a well. Sounds about right. But they started off the episode all incensed about other investigators blowing things out of proportion.
You know, it's been investigated by other people, and they didn't necessarily get the facts right as far as we know.
No, they haven't. It's been blown way out of proportion.
You would assume that they're talking about ghost adventures here. I mean, it's no secret how Jason feels about Zach, at least from what I've seen of his posts online. Meow. But from my perspective, Ghost Hunters fell into the same sensationalist narrative trap that Ghost Adventures did.
We need to try to figure out what's truly going on over here and just let them know the facts.
Right.
The facts.
Like that Johanna was 5 months pregnant? Did they make all these set the record straight comments about the EMF thing? Like that's what they were all worked up about? But that only applied to people feeling uncomfy and queasy in the basement. How was that blown out of proportion? And they didn't know that until they got to the location. So they wouldn't know that that was blown out of proportion until they actually got to the location and did their measurements. This Ghost Hunters episode kind of feels like it was just a way for them to be passive aggressive towards Ghost Adventures instead of doing an actual good faith investigation. Ultimately, I'm not very impressed with Tap's work here. Feels very incomplete. Well, you know, maybe the spirits will attach to them, follow them home, and throw rosaries 50 yards down their hallway. Who knows? Okay, actually, I have to talk about something. Not even joking about this. Since I posted the last video, I have had some pretty strange things happen around here. So I'm gonna break out the little recorder once again and see if I can capture anything, any EVPs or anything like that. So, okay, here goes. Hello? Is anyone there? Alright, let's see what we got.
Hello, is anyone there? This video is sponsored by Factor.
Factor is a meal delivery service that makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever. With chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your doorstep and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code WOLF50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That's code WOLF50 at Factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. One of the biggest differences with Factor's meals is that they're fresh and never frozen. And it's cheaper than takeout. Take it from someone who's had a lot of frozen meals and also caved in on a lot of takeout. Factor meals are better than both. You can skip the grocery stores, skip the restaurants, skip getting into the car, period. You can live the dream. Just stay home. Just stay home and don't do anything. So much easier than doing things. Head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code WOLF50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That's code WOLF50 at Factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. Thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to watching footage of people walking around empty buildings at night. In addition to visiting Bobby Mackey's Music World 3 times with the Ghost Adventures crew, Nick Groff visited the location an additional 2 times for his show Paranormal Lockdown in 2018 and his show Deathwalker in 2021. So all in all, Nick has been there 5 times. He loves running so much, he's been running it back.
Stop running!
For Paranormal Lockdown, Nick visits with his co-host Katrina, who had never been to the location before. For Deathwalker, he visits by himself. And honestly, that's a pretty depressing episode of television to watch. Hope you like really slow voiceover.
I personally feel drawn to Bobby Mackey's Music World in Wilder, Kentucky.
Yeah, man, we got that much. This is your 5th time going there. I think it's safe to say you're pretty interested in the place. Even Bobby Mackey himself was kind of like, dude, what are you still doing here?
Lots of people are wondering why you wanted to come back.
In both of his revisits, Nick seems determined, just like Jason Hawes was, to set the record straight on this place.
We want to set those facts straight, peel back, to get to the core of what's happening here.
He talks to a local historian about the facts of the Pearl Bryan case, like I talked about in part 1. He also clarifies that there's no record of a satanic cult.
None ever existed in any part of Campbell County in the late 1800s. It's obvious that Pearl's head could have never been thrown into the well.
You get the impression that Nick's ready to blow this thing wide open. But inevitably, his conclusion in both shows remains the same one Zach Bagans arrived at in the very first episode. Bobby Mackey's is still a place that houses pure evil.
Bobby Mackey's is absolutely haunted.
One thing I am certain about, and that is Bobby Mackey's music world is being haunted by something, or perhaps more than one spirit.
Now, how did they arrive at this conclusion? Again. Well, time to talk about their investigation. One thing that stood out to me right away was that they use an incredibly high number of really sketchy devices to get evidence in these two shows. Like this Geoport thing?
The Geoport uses a phonetic sound bank application that spirits can manipulate to directly communicate with us.
Nick loves using these. They're basically a glorified ovilus where they pull random words from a preloaded dictionary. I've always found these ovilus-like devices really sketchy, but listening to Nick explain how they work really hammers it home.
We use the spectral geobox, which converts laser light to sound, giving spirits another way to communicate.
It converts laser light to sound. It really bothers me that there are people out there that would just hear that and accept it. Because I have a million questions. Like, if it converts laser light to sound, then wouldn't we be able to see the light that it's converting into sound? Especially in pitch black darkness? Let me guess. It's invisible light. We can't see it, but the magic box can. Right. Apparently, these geobox devices were created by paranormal engineer George Brown. Interestingly, they're not devices that were used outside of Nick Groff's TV shows, because they're not exactly for sale. George has only built 5 of them, according to a 2017 interview. If that doesn't set off any red flags with you, I don't know what else to say.
I think we need to call George Brown and Steve Huff, bring them in as quick as possible for night 2.
George even appears in the Bel Air House episode of Paranormal Lockdown to show off the devices and investigate. And it's very entertaining to hear him try to explain how the devices work.
It has like 4 radio scanners in it and multiple beds in it, so it probably increased the responses that we receive through it. Instead of manipulating the waves on kind of like a mechanical or a magnetic level, they actually manipulate the circuits inside the box.
4 radio scanners? The ghost can manipulate the circuits? This whole thing is sketchy as hell for me, so I'm inclined to throw out any so-called evidence these devices give.
What are you?
Speaking of sketchy devices, Nick decides to break out the rarely seen God helmet.
I'm going to use the God helmet, and this applies magnetic signals to the temporal lobes of the brain.
I've only seen the God helmet one other time, when it was used by Jeremy in the Netflix show 28 Days Haunted. And well, that was an unforgettable scene.
Oh my God, take this off. Something is trying to take me over.
Oh, Jeremy. Hope he's doing well these days. Unfortunately, Nick's time with the God helmet is much less eventful, but he tries really hard to make it interesting.
I'm seeing this figure of this old man behind the wall. The teeth are sharp, the face is drooping. He's trying to get through the wood to come through the wall.
They never revisit this, by the way. The elderly beaver man with sharp teeth trying to chew his way through the wall. They never talk about him ever again.
I see it. I have to stop that. All right, I'm gonna take the helmet off.
I didn't think it was possible to make the God helmet boring, but Nick Groff proved me wrong. Speaking of boring, I touched on this earlier, but the Deathwalker episode on Bobby Mackey's is borderline unwatchable. Just listen to this narration.
In the past, I vowed to never return to Bobby Mackey's music world due to the negativity it brought me in my life.
This episode is 50 minutes long, but it feels a lot longer than that.
I come to saying, she had to take me right in there. Me and Robert had 2 hours. So he said,
Nick, come on, man. Get some energy in there. You gotta take some cues from the younger guys.
Oh my God! All right, guys, we have Bobby Mackey.
Unfortunately, there's nothing useful or interesting in the Deathwalker episode. It's just Nick talking to himself in the dark, and he includes every dull moment.
Use my energy. You can come out here and manifest.
Before we say goodbye to Nick Groff and leave him to silently sit in the dark once more, there is something that happens in Paranormal Lockdown that I found kind of interesting. Late in the episode, they catch a pretty intense spirit orb on camera.
Yeah, look at that's amazing.
Most of the time when I see one of these so-called orbs, I'm like, well, that's just dust. Like in the Ghost Adventures episodes, there were times when Zach came on the voiceover like, I know it looks like dust floating in front of the camera, but it is in fact not. Trust me, bro.
If this were a piece of dust near the front of the camera's lens, then we would easily see it pass over in front of Aaron and not disappear into his head. Again, if this were a piece of dust right near the camera's lens, you would easily see it pass over in front of Nick.
Apparently the concept of a speck of dust floating away from the camera was a wild possibility they just hadn't considered. But this glowing, floating thing they caught on camera clearly isn't a dust particle. So what is it? You know what? I don't know for sure. I'm not experienced enough at looking at this kind of thing to verify it. However, if I were to spitball a rational explanation, I'd say the movement of this thing, especially at the beginning, looks a lot like a spider on a web to me. It's possible that the camera, which, let's face it, isn't the highest quality, has the web out of focus and the spider is reflecting the camera's light back. It's too bad that they didn't check the space right in front of where they put the camera to see if there was anything there, because they could have debunked this right away if they had found a spider web there. Honestly, I think this just encapsulates my problem with a lot of these ghost hunting shows. It's that they often jump straight to the paranormal explanation without even considering a non-paranormal one. It would go a long way with me if they even thought about taking the extra step. Hey, let's go check the space directly in front of the camera and see if there's anything there. But they don't. They just go, wow, great evidence. No need to look into this any further. You want to know how long this orb was on screen, by the way?
I documented this light anomaly, this ball of energy that was manifesting for 8 minutes long on a static night vision camera that I set up down here when I slept here.
8 minutes. Albert Wesker would have had to leave early.
7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you.
But actually, the fact that Nick clarifies in Deathwalker that the orb footage is apparently 8 minutes long, yet we only ever see the 50-second clip over and over, is kind of suspicious. And if this footage of Nick watching the recording is to be believed, the footage isn't sped up either. It's in real time, according to the time codes in the corner. So if the orb was on screen for 8 minutes, where's the other 7 minutes of video? Come on, give us the Snyder cut of this thing. We need to see the complete footage. My favorite moment from these Nick Groff episodes has to be his attempt at doing something edgy and confrontational to the spirits.
I'm gonna sleep above the well.
He decides to sleep above the portal to hell in a hammock.
Nick is in his hammock over the well.
It's so dramatic, I'm not gonna lie. I love Nick doing this kind of Wish.com version of a Zach Bagans stunt. I'm going to put my butt right over this portal to hell. I dare you to touch my butt, demons! Do not run from this!
Do it! Hit this! Come on, do it!
In conclusion, admittedly, I'm not very familiar with Nick Groff outside of these 5 episodes I've watched and some things I've read online about his soured relationship with Zach Bagans, but To me, these two episodes portray a man who just can't let this thing go. Nick starts out the paranormal lockdown episode by reaffirming that even though he knows Pearl, Brian, and Johanna have almost no connection to the Bobby Mackey's location, that the place is still haunted anyway.
I know from personal experiences that this place is haunted.
I think in Nick's case, he's got too much baggage with this location and its connection to Ghost Adventures, a show that has caused him a lot of personal turmoil, that I suspect he's not ready yet to completely sever the paranormal explanations here from his past experiences at this place. I think the most damning example of this is something he says in Deathwalker. He's talking to Matt Coates, who's still a caretaker there, apparently, and he conspires that the location is haunted by some kind of entity that's merely masquerading as Pearl Brian's murderers.
You know, the old urban legend about Scott and Alonzo, you know, if we're saying, oh, that's what's here for hundreds of people who've come here, they keep interjecting that into this environment, this thing can be like, yeah, I'm it, but it's really not it. That's the scary part.
Even with all the evidence that the ghost stories here don't line up with the actual history, Nick is quicker to believe that it's some kind of shapeshifter spirit than to admit that there may be no spirit at all. The clear emotional bias he has makes the episodes kind of sad to watch, honestly.
You hear him walking? Mm-hmm. There's something just walking back here.
Well, that was kind of a downer. Time for a pick-me-up with our next investigation.
Why don't you punch me in the face, maybe smack me around a little? What are you, a wussy?
That's right, it's Ryan and Shane time! Back when they were known as BuzzFeed Unsolved, Ryan and Shane visited Bobby Mackey's place, and the results, as usual with them, were extremely uneventful. For the unfamiliar, Ryan is a believer and Shane is a skeptic. It's not unusual for ghost investigation shows to have believers at the helm, but what makes Ryan and Shane fun to watch is that you also get a true skeptic's perspective. And it doesn't get more skeptical than openly taunting the spirits.
What about the demons?
Jesus Christ.
Are they here?
You know, it's funny because if you watch the Ghost Adventures episodes, the spirits hate Zach Bagans and the Ghost Adventures crew. They're constantly threatening to harm or even kill them. And Zach theorizes that it's because he's so verbally aggressive towards them.
Why is it me?
Because I'm the one talking all the
In contrast, though, here you have Shane being way more annoying and disrespectful.
Demons!
Fucking,
I'm not.
turn the light off!
Fucking shut up!
Demons!
What is.
You're not trying hard enough!
And absolutely nothing happens to him.
Demons, you cowards!
But that's my.
Turn the light off. No, it's a bunch of baloney, man.
If Bobby Mackey's place is so haunted, then why did nothing happen to Shane when he was openly mocking the spirits there? I mean, can you imagine a more perfect target to terrorize? You're telling me that these spirits have attached to multiple people and followed them home, but then they just left this smug trash talker totally alone? It's kind of like if you disrespect a mob boss and then he doesn't whack you. Makes him look weak, you know? It's an interesting contrast, especially since other paranormal investigators insist that you do not want to mess around with the spirits at Bobby Mackey's.
You better buckle up because it's not going to be an easy ride for you.
Turn it on if you want to hurt us.
Why do you keep asking your questions like that? What's wrong with you? Do you want to fucking die?
As usual, Ryan and Shane's visit makes the location look very much not haunted at all.
No demons in there. This place is cleared.
It's amazing because there really is nothing to talk about with this episode. Nothing happens to them at all. For a location in which people have said they've been physically picked up and tossed around the room and seen full body apparitions and things like that, to all of a sudden, when a single skeptic visits the place, nothing. Thank you, as always, Ryan and Shane, for showing a different side to this place. Consider me a Shaniac for life.
Alrighty.
Wait, what's going on, guys? Why are you sitting down in separate rooms? Oh my God, are you guys breaking up?
I guess we just hope you guys follow us this one last time.
Of course, Ryan. And where am I following you? Shane's gonna be there too, right?
To our very own independent streaming service, Watcher.
Did I say Shaniac for life? Because what I meant was more along the lines of, I'm a Shaniac as far into the future as it's convenient. But hey, people make mistakes. You know, there's plenty of YouTubers on this site that have uploaded hundreds of terrible, unwatchable videos. I think we can let Ryan and Shane have just the one terrible, unwatchable video. They've earned a pass. Just the one, though. It's been used up. Anyway, let's move on to the final alternate investigation, Sam and Colby. First, you may notice that Sam and Colby aren't alone for this one.
Today we are here with Project Fear!
Oh, look, it's the Project Fear guys, Dakota, Alex, and Tanner. It's like a little Conjuring House reunion. Sorry, I'm just imagining the looks on their face if they saw me walk up, with their smile slowly disappear and their lips start curling. I don't know. I'll never have to find out. So, unfortunately, this Sam and Colby episode is pretty boring. It's a lot of them just jumping at shadows like normal.
Okay, that's up. It was definitely back there.
Sam and Colby are jumpy enough on their own, but when you add 3 other hyperactive guys into the mix, it just amplifies all their reactions.
Dude, there's nothing even over here. What the fuck was that?
It's the house settling, guys. Come on. I've heard that exact sound in my own home.
Yeah, it was like this.
Exactly like that. It was exactly like that.
Literally what just happened in front of us.
No, it was not just like that. Oh man, I can't with these guys. Let's replay the 2 sounds. One sounds like settling, and one sounds like knocking. This is an incredibly old building. It's about to be demolished. It's in such a bad state. It's literally falling apart. A building that's gradually falling apart piece by piece is gonna make some noise while doing it. So yeah, there's not much about the actual investigation I want to talk about, because just like in their Conjuring House videos, it's like they actively avoid considering a rational explanation for anything. Here's an example.
Yo, dude, that's weird.
It's weird because there's no like electrical anything in that corner there.
Did you see it? Sam is literally pointing the EMF meter at an electrical outlet on the wall. Oh, I'm surrounded by dogs.
There's tons of dogs around. We're getting fucking surrounded.
Anyway, to set up their investigation, Sam and Colby repeat a lot of the same misinformation about Pearl and Johanna, but they also add some other incorrect claims.
Some believe that the reason Bobby Mackey's is haunted is due to the Licking River behind the club, one of the only rivers in the world that flows north.
This claim also appears in Twin Paranormal's video on Bobby Mackey's, which they posted just 1 week after Sam and Colby's video.
The Licking River is one of the only rivers in the world to flow north, causing a lot of energy.
Would you like to know if it's true? Would you like to know if it's actually rare for a river to flow to the north? Well, it's not. There are many rivers that flow north. There's the St. Johns River, the Bighorn River, the Lena River, the Athabasca, the Magdalena, the Ob, the San Pedro, the Yenisei, and on and on and on. It's not rare for a river to flow north. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. The Nile River runs north. Arguably the most famous river in the world, the Nile. You want to know what groundbreaking research I had to do to obtain this coveted information? I just Googled what rivers flow north. I researched these videos all by myself. These guys literally have teams of people working on their videos for them. I just don't get it.
So Bobby bought this club and turned it into a music venue in 1978.
These musicians look a little funny to me. They're probably just demon-possessed or something.
In 1943, a man named Buck Brady bought this building and named it the Primrose Country Club Casino.
Huh, weird. That row of wooden stubs in this vintage photograph go from square to circular.
She was a dancer during the Latin Quarter era and fell in love with a man named Robert Randall.
Nice, barely legible sign there, guys. Also, how many musicians are mic'd up in this tiny room? So yeah, despite having teams of people working on these videos, not only are they poorly researched and apparently not fact-checked, they're also using AI-generated images, which is disappointing to say the least. I don't understand why they even bother because, for example, this image of Robert Randall is on screen for about 1 second. And just before it, they have what appears to be a legit depiction of dancers from the era. So why not just use genuine photos? Why use AI at all? It might only be a couple seconds long, but it's an example of favoring the style of the video over the substance of the video, which has always been my main criticism of Sam and Colby. Especially in moments like these where you're supposedly sharing historical context, I believe it's important to be as accurate as possible, especially when the AI images you use are ugly as sin. I mean, I can't get over these eldritch abominations in this picture. Moving on, after Sam says the Licking River is one of the only rivers that flows north, he cites another incorrect claim.
Bobby Mackey's was also built on a fault line, so among that, the river, and the magnetic charge, it said that the entire area has a magnetic field strong enough to lead to hallucinations.
Not sure where they got this information, but it's also not true, as proven by geologist Sharon Hill. According to geological maps of the area, Sharon attests that there are no faults anywhere near the location. In addition, Sam's assertion here about electromagnetic fields is similar to what Jason Hawes said in that Ghost Hunters episode from earlier, but once again, there's no scientific basis for EMF's effect on human perception.
Carl worked at the Bloody Bucket and became a manager at Bobby Mackey.
Bloody Bucket equals building's former name. The building was never called the Bloody Bucket. That was just a local nickname that was given to the place. So saying that Carl worked at the Bloody Bucket is totally wrong, but now I'm really starting to nitpick. Sam and Colby's video is an hour and a half long. I could go on and on with these little corrections like these, but you get the idea. It follows a similar pattern, right? A familiar pattern. Nothing's fact-checked because really all they're interested in is creating dramatic entertainment.
Johanna Jewel, Johanna Jewel, Johanna Jewel.
Johanna Jewel, Johanna Jewel, Johanna Jewel. Sorry, that clip cracks me up. So at the time that I recorded this, I hadn't watched the entire episode because I got a little bored and I was like, I get it. That's all they have for me. But actually, I would be remiss not to mention that late in the episode, just before they're about to leave, one of the Project Fear guys, Alex, I believe, gets scratched on the leg.
Feels like it's a little cramped up right now.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, there is a leg.
It just said received! It just said received!
Wait till you watch our footage. You're gonna freak out.
I'm really hoping there's a rational explanation besides just like he scratched himself for the camera. But frankly, I'm exhausted at the moment. So, you know, what the heck? He got scratched. Ghosts are real. We've got definitive proof. That was it. You just saw it. Ghosts can scratch people. We've got it. Frankly, we got a lot more important stuff to talk about in regards to Bobby Mackey's, but I had to mention it. He gets scratched. Finally, though, I have to mention that Sam and Colby also say something very interesting about Johanna's journal.
Now, her journal was transcribed, but the original was accidentally burnt in a fire, so we actually don't know how much of her story is true.
Johanna's journal was burnt in a fire? Where'd they find that out from? Well, like me, they apparently also read Doug Hensley's book, and it led them to a conclusion that I've been building up to this whole video.
All the haunted stories here at Bobby Mackey's have a singular origin point: Carl Lawson.
Well, they got a lot wrong in their video, but they got that much right, and it's time we talked about it. After seeing all these investigations, after looking into the history of the place, after reading news articles and debunks, one thing becomes clear. All roads lead back to Carl Lawson.
This place is haunted.
It's time to confront the mastermind himself, Carl Lawson. I haven't talked about Carl much up to this point, aside from the, that's interesting moments here and there. And that's been by design, because once you hear all the stuff Carl says in this book, I think you'll have a very good idea of what's actually been going on at Bobby Mackey's place. First, some quick background. This book, Hell's Gate, was written by Doug Hensley, who was featured heavily in the first Ghost Adventures episode. Published in June 1993, Hell's Gate claims to be the story behind, quote, the terror at Bobby Mackey's music world. Although I don't think this is the original printing of the book, because I found this TV segment from 1991 that has the book under a slightly different title.
Walk along the banks of the Licking River behind the bar, and Doug Hensley will tell you a history of the occult, which he's written about in his book, Terror at Music World.
I learned that satanic worshipers still today worship the devil along the Licking River because it flows north.
Ugh, not this north flowing crap again. Why would satanic worshipers even care if a river flowed to the north? Is hell up at the North Pole or what? But I digress. See, as factual as Doug tries to come across in that interview just now, the very first page of this book is very upfront about how potentially non-factual it is. In the introduction to the book, Doug Hensley admits, even though each incident actually happened, they've been fictionalized for the purpose of telling. Now, even though it says this is a fictionalized retelling, Doug begins every chapter by restating that the events he's writing about were described in detail to him primarily by Carl Lawson. So I'm guessing what Doug meant by this fictionalized statement is that he fills in some dialogue here and there, maybe adds in some extra descriptions and things like that, but that the major events are all as close to how Carl described them as possible. This is a very generous definition of the term fictionalized, but I'm comfortable extending that benefit of the doubt for now. So with that, let's get into the events of Hell's Gate from Carl's perspective. After Bobby and Janet Mackey buy the building, Carl just shows up one day and offers to work there. And Bobby not only hires him on the spot, he immediately leaves him alone with his wife Janet, which I found kind of odd. Carl instantly tells Janet that there's ghosts there. But don't worry, they're his friends. He talks about seeing the spirit of Johanna and having positive interactions with her. Apparently, Johanna even tells someone off screen, "Don't harm this man. He's the keeper of beasts and children." If this is starting to sound like an episode of Supernatural to you, then you're picking up on the right cues. Right away, I'm amazed. I mean, we have had investigator after investigator in these episodes try to get one peep out of Johanna, and they can't.
I'm in your secret room right now, sweetie.
But Carl's already got full sentences. Very impressive. Let's keep reading. In chapter 5, Carl gets attacked by a swarm of bats that knock him off a ladder. It's a pretty exciting scene, but nothing overtly supernatural. Carl does wonder why this happened to him though, because in his words, Johanna has always protected him. And here's where things really start ramping up. In chapter 6, Carl and Janet are working in the basement when maniacal laughter and shrieking erupt everywhere around them. A blood-chilling demon physically picks Janet up off the floor and tries to dunk her in a sink full of paranormal tar. In chapter 7, Carl is physically picked up and thrown across the room by a demon man with a noose around his neck. He tries to drive away from the club, but the demon takes control of the car and tries to crash him into oncoming traffic. In chapter 8, a fire breaks out at the club, and the ghost of Alonzo Walling, one of Pearl Bryan's murderers if you remember, appears to Carl and taunts him saying, "You better stay out of our business or you'll die, and you won't die game," whatever that means, before cackling and disappearing. In chapter 10, Carl encounters a demon in the mirror who calls themselves the Ancient One, or the Morning Star. The demon gives Carl another Scooby-Doo lecture about the dangers of meddling in their affairs before cackling and disappearing. All of these events take place within a few days of each other. Carl and Janet are picked up and tossed around the room like rag dolls without any provocation or anything. They see full body apparitions, they have full conversations with the spirits, they're seeing a frankly amazing amount of paranormal activity. These spirits are active and they're violent. But interestingly, when paranormal investigators visit and taunt these spirits, they don't get picked up and thrown around on camera. Not even when they ask nicely.
Come on, George, I'm gonna walk towards the stairs. Why don't you maybe help me, give me a little shove.
And if you want to pick me up or scratch me or slam me into the ceiling, now would be the best opportunity for that.
Throughout the first half of Hell's Gate, the only people who see these apparitions, hear these voices, feel these unseen forces are Carl Lawson and Janet Mackey. And it tends to happen as soon as Bobby leaves the room. The spirits are so considerate to wait until he leaves to terrorize people. Anyway, get ready for this next part. It's a real doozy. Carl says the ghost of Pearl Bryan appears before him and says, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." And that's when the ghosts of her murderers, Alonzo and Scott, laugh maniacally as they literally beat Carl unconscious. When he awakens, the ghost of Buck Brady, the former owner of the building, appears and tells Carl to dig up the evil well in the basement, which he says is a portal to hell. Buck Brady was a real person, by the way, and possibly the first one in this story that actually has a real connection to the location. So Carl goes and digs up the floor with a pickaxe that just so happens to be sitting around, and in the pit by the well he finds Johanna's diary, which only has one written page that tells him to search the spotlight room in the attic. There's a sudden rotten stench that forces Carl outside, and when he returns, the diary is gone. Buck Brady appears to Carl later and tells him that the diary was consumed by the fires of hell. Don't you just hate it when that happens? You're reading a book, you leave the room, you come back, and it's been engulfed by hellfire. It's just the pits. Hang in there, we're almost done with this part. Carl goes up to the spotlight room and starts reading the rest of Johanna's diary that was hidden there. Johanna talks a lot about her lover, Robert Randall, her mobster father, who owns the club and hates Robert, and the fact that she's pregnant. Johanna writes down her detailed reaction to finding that Robert had been killed by her father, and she says she's going to poison her father and then herself. That's all stuff about Johanna that we already heard in the Ghost Adventures episodes, so nothing new there, but the next part is new, and I'm kind of shocked that no one's mentioned this next bit in any of the investigations I've watched. It's totally new Johanna and Pearl Bryan lore. Check this out. Johanna writes an extremely long entry after drinking the poison, claiming she doesn't have much time and she can feel herself dying. That's when her father, who's also dying of poison, cackles and starts monologuing about how he sold his soul to the devil and that the old well was a portal to hell. Her father goes on with this anime villain monologue about how as long as the well is unsealed, he can come back to life over and over, and oh yeah, he's also the spirit of Alonzo Walling, who killed Pearl Bryan. So then Johanna's father, who's actually Alonzo Walling, starts talking about throwing Pearl's decapitated head down the well so they could worship the devil, and that all pregnant women will suffer his wrath forever and pay with their lives. Yeah. Johanna ends her diary by pleading that whoever finds it, seal up the well to stop the cycle of evil. That whoever finds the diary is her only hope, and with her last bit of strength, she's going to separate the diary into two halves and put the other half in the basement. For some reason, Carl starts getting attacked by a swarm of bats again on his way back down, and then somehow another fire starts up, and unfortunately, Carl realizes too late that, oh, he left Johanna's diary inside the building that's on fire. Looks like any evidence of Johanna's existence has been burned in the flames. You know, when I got this book, I was somehow under the mistaken impression that I was gonna get like some kind of journalistic depiction of what happened, but instead, it's like a bad episode of Supernatural. Carl's story here is way more cartoonish than I could have imagined. Between the constantly attacking swarms of bats, the cackling mirror demons, the suspicious multiple fires, the exposition dump diary. I mean, I'm just gonna call a spade at this point. This is a bunch of nonsense. It's not even remotely believable. And the worst part of all this is that Carl's stories here are the origin for all the urban legends as they relate to Bobby Mackey's music world. Carl is the reason Pearl Bryan and her murderers are incorrectly associated with the place because he claims their spirits appeared to him multiple times. Carl is the sole source for all the Johanna lore, all of which comes from a diary whose part 1 was consumed by the fires of hell, and whose part 2 was consumed by a physical fire. All of the discrepancies that have added up until now, they all appear to originate with Carl Lawson's story time, as retold by Doug Hensley. The whole thing about Johanna's lover, Robert Randall, coincidentally having the same name as Bobby Mackey, who was named Robert Randall Mackey. Well, I think it's pretty obvious which name came first. I'm guessing when Carl was hired by Bobby Mackey, he saw the name Robert Randall Mackey signed on his paychecks or something, and thus the mysterious crooner character Robert Randall was born. The Robert Randall name connection is awkwardly commented on several times in the book. Robert Randall? Why, that's Bobby's name. Huh, Robert Randall and Bobby have the same name, Carl ponders. Maybe Bobby is Robert Randall reincarnated. Because that's such a natural, immediate thought to have, right? There's even a part later on where Buck Brady's ghost tells Carl that Johanna may want to possess the body of Janet Mackey so that she can have physical relations with Bobby, the reincarnated Robert Randall. Yeah, I know. Maybe there's some high EMF in this room because I'm feeling pretty uncomfortable talking about all this. There's a lot of other weird stuff that happens to Carl in the rest of the book, but considering how satisfied I feel with declaring the whole thing baloney at this point, I'll just give you a little speed run of the events. Let's see, there's Carl's epic holy water battle with some 7-foot-tall demonic goat man. Carl wins handily, of course. Honestly, Carl has so many encounters with demonic beasts and cackling murderer ghosts in this book, it's hard to keep track. It basically happens every 5 pages or so. There's this part where Carl encounters a zombie dwarf and then afterwards recalls being bullied in school by a little person. I don't know what to say about this one. And finally, there's the part where Carl gets successfully possessed by a demon. Yep, that's right. Carl gets possessed. As usual with these possessions, the main symptoms seem to be pronounced irritability, some cutting, sarcastic comments, and general laziness. Well, there was one more notable symptom, actually. I won't show you the page for this one, but late in the book, there's an incredibly graphic description of Carl's hemorrhoids, which he blames on the demonic possession. I wish I hadn't read that far, to be honest. Anyway, I won't bother you with all the examples in the book, but Janet's the one who quickly becomes concerned that Carl is very irritable around her and has been drinking a lot more than usual. So she comes to the conclusion that he's possessed, and she sends for Reverend Glenn Cole to come perform an exorcism. An exorcism that you can watch on YouTube because they recorded it.
This body is mine! No, it's not! This body is mine! No, it's not!
Yep, you can watch the whole exorcism on Doug Hensley's YouTube channel, where he also promotes his book.
This book, compared to the Amityville Horror, is the real deal. Thank you.
Great promo, Doug. He also has a re-upload of the classic Toyota music video Swagger Wagon for some reason.
It's the Swagger Wagon. I got the pride in my ride in my Swagger Wagon.
He's got an eclectic catalog over there. Musical comedy, exorcisms. There's something for everyone. Anyway, the reason the exorcism was recorded is because this other guy, Larry, brought 3 cameramen and a news reporter. Apparently, he was hoping to make some money from the footage that it produced if something supernatural happened. But nothing started flying around or levitating. Carl just ended up returning to normal.
Leave him, Charlie!
And that's the end of Carl's story. So what do I think happened? Well, after reading the book from front to back, I think it's pretty clear that Carl had some severe mental health issues. I'm not qualified to say exactly what they were, and I don't want to speculate, but everything from all the wild stories that frame him as a superhero fighting evil demons to save the damsels in distress, Johanna and Pearl, to the alarmingly frequent mentions in the book that he was excessively drinking and suddenly blacking out on the floor, all the way to the eventual exorcism scene. To me, it seems like Carl was dealing with a lot of trauma and feeling very out of control of his life, and telling these stories where he's the valiant hero may have been his way of regaining that sense of power and strength and ultimately control. He all but outright admitted this much when he was brought on Jerry Springer.
I never felt in control of anything that I did. My life was just completely not anything I wanted to do. It belonged to something else.
There's no mention in the book of Carl getting any therapy or getting any kind of mental health help. And sadly, I think the exorcism acted as kind of a brute force therapy for him. It's an uncomfortable watch, not because there's any literal demons involved, but because when I watch it, I see a man who is in severe need of seeing an actual mental health professional. And he was failed by all the people around him. Throughout the entire book, no one even brings up a therapist as a possibility. They'd sooner call up a reverend to yell at him like a disobedient child for hours.
You hear me? You understand me? You understand me? No, I don't. Well, yes, you do.
And that brings me to Doug Hensley, the author of the book. No one talked to Carl more than Doug did. He mentioned that the book is based on years worth of interviews, mainly with the staff of Bobby Mackey's, and of them mainly with Carl. And after reading all the encounters with the mirror demons and zombie dwarves and all these ridiculous things, I have to ponder Doug's role in all this. Did he really not realize that the person he was talking to was in need of professional help? He either has little to no experience being around someone with mental health issues and is just completely oblivious to the signs, or he knew that Carl desperately needed help but decided to exploit his stories for money anyway by writing a book about them. Unfortunately, I'm of the opinion that it's the latter. Doug actually keeps republishing this book under more and more sensational names over the years. For example, I bought this one, The Exorcism of Carl Lawson, because I was under the impression he had written 2 books about this. But he hasn't. This is the exact same book as this one, word for word. And now he's trying to sell it under yet another name, An Exorcism in Kentucky, the Carl Lawson story. I don't know if this one is also word for word the same book for the 3rd time, but I wouldn't be shocked. I think Doug really wanted this book to be turned into a movie. There have been countless exorcism films over the years, so why not do one about Carl? I'm not saying Carl is simply a victim in all this, but it does genuinely feel to me like he was exploited. He was definitely exploited by Larry, the guy who recorded the exorcism. He was possibly exploited by Doug, the sensationalist author, and since then he's been exploited seemingly countless times by paranormal investigators who visit the location. Exploited in life, and even exploited in death. Here's a clip from the Sedumsville Rectory episode of Ghost Adventures, where they decide to take a quick detour to Bobby Mackey's.
Carl Lawson just recently passed away, and apparently they have some type of memorial in the gift shop there.
But the GAC refuses to even leave the car.
Nick, do you want to go in and look at the memorial?
I don't want to go inside.
So Zach asks Billy, whoever that is, to go in instead.
Do me a favor. There's a memorial in the gift shop there, okay? I want you to go in there and film it, okay?
So just film the memorial.
Go get shots of Carl's memorial.
I think that flippant attitude kind of says it all. Go get some shots of the memorial. Now, would you believe that they actually have a captured EVP to share? And they say it features Carl's voice.
Wanda, who worked with Carl for many years, gives us a recently recorded EVP of his voice.
Let me see your Band-Aid.
Here's the Band-Aid, Mickey.
Okay.
Here's the Band-Aid, Mickey.
And I had my hands around a pastor's neck.
Here's the Band-Aid, Mickey.
It seems that even in death, Carl cannot break his ties to Bobby Mackey's.
Wonder whose fault that is. So Carl told some tall tales, and all these people turned them into content for their own ends. And it brings up an important question. did Bobby Mackey also use Carl for his own ends? I haven't mentioned Bobby a whole lot until now, and that's because he's been sticking to the same story about all the ghost stuff. He doesn't believe it! He didn't believe it throughout Doug Hensley's book, even going so far as to say that, quote, "Nothing anyone can say or do will make me believe in ghosts." He didn't believe it on Jerry Springer in 1991.
Are you buying this? No. First of all, I don't believe in ghosts.
He didn't believe it on Ghost Adventures in 2008.
I still don't see how it can be scientifically possible.
He didn't believe it in Paranormal Lockdown in 2018.
I never was one to believe in that sort of thing.
Right.
I still don't.
Even today, he still maintains that he doesn't believe it.
I've heard all kinds of stories, and everybody's got a story about it.
Mackey doesn't consider himself to be a believer in the paranormal.
At first, I totally bought it. The man's a hard-nosed skeptic. I can relate, but especially after reading the book, he gets into so many angry arguments with Janet and Carl where he's not at all interested in their stories or even remotely concerned about their well-being. Eventually, late in the book, even when a lot of his staff comes together and there's like a dozen people in the room all saying they've seen ghosts around the location, he tells them all he doesn't believe them. Now, I know this sounds rich coming from me because I don't believe them either. But a key difference here, I don't know them. They're not my wife. They're not my employees. They're not people I spend time with every single day. I have the right to disbelieve them. But not only does Bobby disbelieve them, he doesn't spend any time trying to find out what's really going on. He's completely incurious. In every scene, when someone tries to tell him about a ghost, he either gets angry and tries to shut the conversation down, or he laughs at them and waves them off. At a certain point, it starts getting suspicious to me. And think about it. If you own a haunted location, wouldn't it add to the believability if the owner was a skeptic? Is it possible that Bobby's position as an unbeliever is all part of a marketing stunt? I mean, for crying out loud, these people went on Jerry Springer. And frankly, other than repeatedly stating he doesn't believe in ghosts, Bobby isn't a very believable skeptic.
First of all, I don't believe in ghosts at all. And we've been there for 13 years.
But that's not true.
Well,
that's not true.
It is true.
No. Believe me, Jerry.
We've been there for 13 years.
He's constantly saying things that hint at him being the reincarnated Robert Randall. Things that seamlessly link up with all the supernatural stories. Things that a real hard-nosed skeptic wouldn't say.
Reincarnation, I don't believe in.
Sometimes I think dark history has a way of repeating itself.
If anything like that is possible, I can see the connection. I mean, I really feel that something has kept me here. I felt like I'd been in here before.
Those don't sound like such skeptical statements to me. And there's also Bobby Mackey's biggest hit song, Johanna, in which Bobby wonders aloud if she still haunts the place.
Johanna, Johanna, where are you now? Could it be you're still here somehow?
This is the same guy who got into angry yelling matches with Janet at the mere suggestion there were ghosts there? I'm not sure I buy it. I think it may all be part of a marketing strategy. Bobby's even come up with a nifty tagline that summarizes the strategy.
We like to say, come for the ghosts and stay for the music.
Well, it looks like it worked. People did stay for the music. Bobby's still making country music today. In fact, he has some new songs, although I can't say I recommend them.
She says me love you long time.
When I was researching this, I came across a very interesting detail. One that came up in Sam and Colby's video, actually. It's about the sign that was put up in the entrance to Bobby Mackey's Music World. Warning to our patrons, this establishment is purported to be haunted. Management is not responsible and cannot be held liable for any actions of any ghosts or spirits on this premises. It's weird, right? Because Bobby's supposedly such a hard-nosed skeptic that thinks all this ghost stuff is nonsense. He said he wants people to know this place as a country music bar first and foremost. So why the sign? Well, apparently, it's because of a lawsuit.
You know why they came up with the sign, though?
Why?
It's because somebody claimed that they got beat up by a ghost in the bathroom. And then sued Bobby Mackey for it.
When I heard this, I didn't think much of it at first. Frivolous lawsuit, whatever. Those happen all the time. But as I went deeper and deeper into this thing, I kept coming back to this sign. The story behind it just didn't add up for me.
Somebody claimed that they got beat up by a ghost in the bathroom. And then sued Bobby Mackey for it.
A guy claims he got beat up by a ghost in the bathroom. So the judge rules in his favor, and Bobby Mackey's is forced to put up a sign. That makes no sense. I searched court records on the Kentucky Court of Justice website, but unfortunately couldn't find anything. The case was from October 1993, so I don't know if the online court records just don't go back that far or what. But I did find this newspaper article from the Park City Daily News, who identifies the plaintiff as J.R. Costigan. The article claims Costigan walked around the club daring the ghost to show itself. The ghost appeared, clocked him, then disappeared. Mysteriously, Bobby Mackey's attorney, Robert Lotz, claims that he can't find Costigan. Apparently, he posted a P.O. box as his address on the lawsuit, and there's no telephone listing for him. Lotz even suspiciously comments that he was, quote, hired to treat the lawsuit as legitimate. What makes you think the lawsuit isn't legitimate, Mr. Lotz? Kind of a weird thing to say. Costigan apparently was seeking $1,000 in damages, and for Bobby Mackey to post a warning sign that the club was haunted, which they obviously did. But why? According to this article I found in the Cincinnati Enquirer, Costigan failed to appear in court, so the judge dismissed the case. So let me get this straight. A man named J.R., with no address and no phone number, and who never appeared in court, filed a lawsuit demanding that a warning sign be put up at the club saying that the place is haunted. The case gets thrown out as nonsense, but then you still put the sign up? Why would the judge order you to put the sign up when the case was dismissed? The only reason you'd have the sign up after a dismissed case is if you wanted to have the sign up. And just who is this J.R. Costigan anyway? I'm no lawyer, but apparently you can litigate under a pseudonym in special circumstances. However, you usually have to file a motion requesting it. But with a situation like this where the case is immediately thrown out, I'm not sure they even got that far. Still, it brings up the possibility that the name J.R. Costigan was a pseudonym. So who filed the lawsuit? Interestingly, and this may have just been a typo, but I found this summary of the case from Rise Up Paranormal, who identifies the plaintiff not as J.R. Costigan, but as a man named Rich Lawson. A man named Rich Lawson actually makes an appearance in the first Ghost Adventures episode, telling a story about being attacked in the men's restroom, just like J.R. Costigan was.
And this bathroom just got intensely hot. And the words, I could hear them just plain as day, like I'm talking to you, die game, die game, die game.
Die game. The same phrase Carl Lawson claims that Alonzo Walling said to him. It's a phrase that doesn't make any sense to me, but I guess it makes sense to the Lawsons. Is Rich Lawson J.R. Costigan? Is he related to Carl Lawson? Did they ask him to pseudonymously file a lawsuit they knew wouldn't go anywhere just so they could have an excuse to hang up the sign? And if they did, it begs the question, why would a hard-nosed skeptic like Bobby Mackey go out of his way to have the first thing you see when you walk in be a sign about the place being haunted? Well, because it's great marketing. And that's what this whole thing has always been about.
Right as you walk in.
This establishment is reported to be haunted.
Management is not responsible and cannot be held liable
for any actions of any ghosts/spirits on these premises. Obviously enough weird stuff has happened here to necessitate a sign like that.
And then so many newspaper clippings of murder cases and hauntings.
That is a sign that I like to see right before we get locked down in a location.
We like to say come for the ghosts and stay for the music.